Hello and welcome back to Castles and Legends. I am at our final castle on our visit to the Lake District, sadly. This is Brougham Castle in Cumbria. It dates back to the 13th century and was actually built on top of a Roman fort. First impressions, very good, so let's have a look around and discover a bit more history. Brougham Castle is located just a couple of miles southeast of the market town Penrith. The 13th century structure is situated on the southern bank of the River Eamont, close to where the River Lover merges with Eamont, and the castle was founded by Norman Robert de Vupon. Before the medieval castle existed, the site was used by the Romans for a Roman fort, as the location was deemed to be of strategic importance. Broome Castle's founder, Robert de Vupon, was a key supporter of King John and one of his most important agents in northern England. In 1203, King John granted Robert the barony of Westmoreland, which included Broome, Appleby and Brough. Shortly after acquiring the land at Broome, he began constructing the castle. The construction of Broome Castle was composed of a stone keep and various service buildings. The castle was surrounded by a wooden palisade, and the north side was protected by a ditch, and the west sides by the rivers Eamont and Lover. It was built next to the site of the Roman fort, and some of the construction materials even came from the abandoned fort. Robert de Vupon's grandson, also called Robert, formed part of the rebellion of Simon de Montfort against Henry II and fought at the Battle of Lewes. He was killed from injuries sustained at the battle. His two daughters, Isabella and Idone, were due to inherit the estates, with Broome being given to Isabella. However, due to a late attainder imposed on her father for his involvement in the revolt, her estates were temporarily given to Roger Clifford to look after in around 1268. Roger then married Isabella and became Lord of Broome to secure control of Broome and Appleby. The castle went through some significant modifications from the 1290s to the early 1300s, initiated by Roger's son Robert Clifford. These alterations were aimed at improving the castle's defences. The keep was made taller, and new gatehouse was added. The curtain wall was rebuilt in stone, and a new tower was added in the southwest corner called the Tower of League. King Edward I stayed at the castle in July 1300 when travelling to Scotland and northern England. Robert Clifford was killed at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. The Scots were frequently raiding northern England and Westmoreland during this time as they attempted to enforce Scottish independence, and while Broome Castle seemed to avoid any of this serious fighting, many of the other estates of the Clifford family were not so fortunate. Robert's son, Roger, decided to join the Earl of Lancaster's rebellion against King Edward II in 1322. The rebellion was unsuccessful, and Roger forfeited the family estates. Just 4 years later, though, the king was overthrown by Roger Mortimer, Earl of March, who quickly restored the estates back to the Clifford family. The family soon also inherited Brough and Pendragon castles, where Idonia, Isabella's sister, died childless. Further raiding and warfare was prevalent around the English-Scottish border throughout the 14th century. In the late 1380s, the castle was badly attacked by Scottish raiders and badly damaged. The castle was left in a dilapidated state and severely in need of repair. It wasn't until the early to mid-1400s that repairs commenced. During the War of the Roses, which lasted from 1455 to 1485, the Clifford family were supporters of the House of Lancaster. When Edward IV, a Yorkist, took the throne in 1461, the lands of the Clifford family were confiscated after John Clifford had been killed fighting for Henry VI. John's son, Henry Clifford, managed to recover Brougham Castle and the rest of the family's estates when the Tudor king, Henry VII, took the throne after the Battle of Bosworth Field. After a brief stint of regular use by the family, the castle once again started to fall into a state of poor repair as the family spent most of their time at the court of Queen Elizabeth I and were no longer regularly living in their northern properties. In 1605, George Clifford, the 3rd Earl of Cumberland, died, leaving his daughter Anne his inheritance. She chose Appleby Castle as her main residence initially, but invested considerable funds and resources into restoring all of the estates to their former glory, including Brougham Castle, where she also added a new bakehouse and brewhouse. She later spent a great deal of time at Brougham Castle and died there on the 22nd of March 1676. Brougham Castle passed on to the Earl of Thanet, who sold off the castle's furnishings and fittings and did so little to maintain its upkeep that it soon fell into ruin. Brougham Castle became a picturesque ruin. One admirer was Charles Henry Foster, an heir to plantations in Jamaica, and he financed repair works. The last Earl of Thanet took over from Foster and attempted to maintain what was left of the castle's fabric, but his successors soon gave up on the upkeep. Today, Brougham Castle is maintained by the English Heritage and open to the public to visit for an entrance fee. When visiting Brougham Castle, you enter through the Gatehouse. The Gatehouse is made up of 3 sections, an outer gatehouse, then a courtyard, and then the inner gatehouse. The gatehouses were constructed in the 13th century, and the inner gatehouse was built first. You can still visibly see where it had a portcullis and gates for protection. The outer gatehouse had a guard's room in the north wall. Both gatehouses had 2 stories above their gate passages, and the courtyard had a block of lodgings on the side facing the river. Once you have passed through the gatehouses, you enter the courtyard. If you turn left here and walk directly onwards over to the Tower of League, which was built by Robert Clifford in around 1300. The tower was 4 stories high and was used both as a residence and for defensive purposes. Not far from the tower is a well which would have provided water for the castle's residents. Moving along from the well was the lodgings for the castle's garrison, where they would have gathered to eat and sleep. Moving on from this is the chapel, and would have once been a building of fine quality with a 3-arched sedilia. Further along in the corner of the castle grounds is the kitchen and then hall. The hall has surprisingly large windows for a defensive building, but these would likely have been covered with strong wooden shutters in hostile times. Leading on from the hall is the great chamber, the lord and his family's private room that they could retire to after a meal, but only a low-level stone outline remains of the chamber. The great chamber remains lead into the basement section of the keep. The keep is the oldest remaining part of the castle. The entrance to the keep is on the east side, which would have made it further difficult for invaders if they managed to break through the two gatehouses. They still had to go all the way round the keep to the entrance, whilst being vulnerable to attack from above and from the Tower of League. The keep reaches 4 stories high, and you are still able to climb the spiral staircase to the top if you have a head for heights, though I have to say the views are certainly worth it. Really enjoyed exploring Brougham Castle and the history and characters from the castle. Great fun, and the ruins very picturesque. There's a lot more to it than I expected that you can explore, and as for the keep, you can climb all the way to the top. However, if you don't like uneven spiral staircases, maybe it's not for you, but the views are amazing. Thank you very much for joining me today on this little adventure tour. I hope to see you again. Please do subscribe if you have not already. And that's all, so bye for now.